Hey, what's going on, guys? This is Mike from MOBOXgraphics.com, and in this Microinteraction video, we're going to be taking a look at how to do this cool like voice search effect in After Effects, similar to what you'd see on Google Voice Search. And in this example, we're just going to do a voice search to ask what the weather is. And yeah, so I mean, you could obviously make this do whatever you want. So let's just go ahead and jump in After Effects here and see how it's done. So in here, After Effects, I already have this composition. The settings are 1600 by 1200, 50 frames per second, duration 10 seconds. And I already have a white background here. So I have a couple icons here already made or that I already had. One is this microphone icon. One is this audio snippet. So basically I just recorded some audio in a audio recording application. You don't need to use this, but it's going to help me out in a little bit. So I'll show you when that's used. So I'm going to drag the microphone icon into the center of the composition. Make sure continually rasterize is on and hit S on the keyboard and just scale it up. So if you don't hit continually rasterize, it'll look all blurry. But when you continually rasterize, it will maintain its vector format because this is an Illustrator file. So I'm just going to scale that down a little bit. And now I'm just going to make a circle. Holding Shift, just create a circle. And I don't want a stroke, but I do want a fill. And I'm just going to center up the anchor point by pressing Y on the keyboard, moving it to the center, and then moving it over the microphone and just making sure it's underneath the microphone. So in terms of the color here, I'm going to make it like a red. And I'm going to make the microphone add a fill to it and make it white. So I think the microphone needs to be a little bit larger, so I'm just going to hit S on the keyboard and scale it up a little bit. And what you'll notice is that some icons are really unbalanced. So this icon is really top heavy, so I'm just going to drag it down just a little bit because I think that looks like it's more in the center than it was before. So, okay, that looks probably pretty good, maybe up a little bit more. Okay, so that looks pretty good. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to rename this shape layer to button. And I am going to add a fill to it. Generate, where's generate effect? It's like second nature. So like sometimes if I think about it too hard, I can't remember how to do it. So I'm gonna make this icon start white. And I guess the microphone icon kind of gray. And then I'm going to add a drop shadow to the button. Make it 180 degrees so it's perfectly underneath and soften that up a bit. So I think that I could probably reduce the opacity just a little bit on that button. And then increase make the microphone icon a little bit darker. Okay, so that looks pretty good. Now I'm going to duplicate this button, put it underneath the original button, and rename this to Audio Scaler. Doesn't matter what you name it. But I'm going to delete the drop shadow. I guess I could probably delete the fill as well. But if I hit S on the keyboard and scale this up, I just want to be able to see it for a sec, and I'm just going to make it kind of like off-white. So something like that. And so now most of our pieces are set. So what I want is when this button clicks, I want it to turn red and I want it to record audio. And while it's recording audio, I want it to like have this scale to the audio. So let's see how that should be done. Let me see if I have a icon here. So I'm just going to pull one of these mouse cursors into this composition. And I think I need to delete that background layer. I just might as well save it without that background layer because I'm constantly making that change. Just gonna scale that down by pressing S on the keyboard. I think that's probably a good size. And I'm just gonna now add a drop shadow to that mouse. 180, increase the softness, increase the distance. Just like that. So I think that looks pretty good so far. Okay, So I need this mouse cursor to go from maybe down here. I'm gonna hit P on the keyboard, up to the button, to click the button. And once it clicks, I'm gonna set another keyframe, and then I'm gonna make it basically move back down. Then over time, I'm gonna make it actually go back to its original spot. I wonder if maybe I could just make it go to its original spot right away. So I'm gonna add some smoothing here using this motion script, this motion tool. It's from mountmograph.com. It does cost money, but it basically what it does is it just adjusts this graph. So you can make your graph kind of look similar to this if you want it to. So I think that looks pretty cool. I'm just gonna maybe make that. So I think you can get an idea of what that tool does just by looking at the graph editor. It basically smooths out the animation. You could do it by hand if you'd like. So I'm just gonna add motion blur to all this so I could just see what it looks like. Okay, so when it gets there, it's gonna now have a clicking. Whoops. It's gonna have a clicking effect. So I'm just gonna set up the anchor point, again, using this tool. If you don't have the tool, you can press Y on the keyboard and just click. And I'm gonna put this under the mouse, make it totally black. Rename this to click. So I want it to scale from 0 with the transparency of 100 up to about that size with a transparency of 0. Again, add the same smoothing to this. I think starting at 100 is a little too high, so I'm just going to drop that down to maybe 66. Just think that looks good. Okay, so now we're ready to go. So this button is going to go from red, so I'm just going to select that fill to red. Press U on the keyboard to just see that transition. I'm just going to press J on the keyboard to bounce back. And I want that button to go from gray. Press U on the keyboard also to see those keyframes. Press K on the keyboard to bounce to your next keyframes. And I want that to turn white. And I'm going to add the same smoothing to this. Okay, we're starting to get some layers here, a lot of layers, so that's good. Maybe delay that by a little bit, so it's like it clicks and then it transitions. Okay, so now I could add my audio. So I'm just gonna add my audio snippet here underneath the background layer. Move it over. And I'm gonna open this up here. And I think if I right click audio, if I right click one of these here, whoops, I can convert these to keyframes. Okay, so what you do here is you just right click audio levels, keyframe assistant, and you go to convert audio to keyframes. And that creates a new null layer. With left, right, and center channels. I don't need left and right, so I'm just gonna delete those keyframes there. And if you look, the audio matched up with this audio down here. So basically what I said in that audio is, what's the weather today? So what's cool is that I could use this audio scale. Just reduce this audio of my music here. What I could use is I could use this audio amplitude, right? So it's changing, to adjust the scale of this audio scaler. So if it S on the keyboard and I hold Alt, I can now link this to that. and you can see nothing happens. So let me multiply it by 5. So that's a lot of motion there. One way to smooth that up is if I select all of these keyframes, I actually need to add a new window, which is called Smoother. And I can do tolerance like 4 and hit apply. Basically, this will now smooth out those keyframes a little bit. Still not that smooth, so I'm just going to select them and apply it again. Still not very smooth, so let me increase the tolerance here up to like 9. So I think 5 might even be too much. Here's an idea. What I could do is I could say equals 100 plus that divided by, let's say, 4. So I'm going to add, so it's going to be constantly 100, but then it's going to scale up. We divide it by 2. Hell, maybe just not even divided by anything. So basically I'm just finding the right level here. So I think that looks good. I'm just gonna make sure this ends at 0. So let's see what that looks like. Just gonna add some smoothing to it that I understand. Yeah, that may be gonna Control Z that one away. So let me just make that invisible because the red bars are getting in my way. I think that looks okay, though I still think it does need some more smoothing. So I'm going to increase the tolerance and apply it again. Basically, every time I apply this tolerance, it's going to make it a little bit less complex, but maybe a little bit simpler and a little bit cuter. I'm also going to stretch these keyframes out a little bit because there are some real rough edges that are kind of irritating me. So I think that looks cool. Obviously you could have done that yourself with just scaling the layer, but I find that when you scale the layer, sometimes it's hard to get a natural look, and when you do it like this, it just makes it natural instantly. So I could probably just delete this audio snippet layer now because I don't need it. So as soon as it pops up, so it's starting to hear audio now. So now I'm gonna create a text layer saying, what's the weather today? So now I could search for an effect called typewriter. Press U on the keyboard. See my audio. And I know basically when this has to end. It's about there. So I think that this first part was what's. So I could just stretch both of these out by holding Alt, making this happen a little bit slower. So all those graphs are very fast. Smooth those out just a little bit. Okay, so I think that looks pretty cool. Now for the final portion of this animation, and that is the layer converting into a sun with the weather. So the button is going to turn from red to yellow. Simple as creating some keyframes. I'm just going to add the same smoothing here with the tool. Simple as that. The microphone could scale from its full size to 0. I could always add all the smoothing later. The weather is going to go from there to there, but I'm also going to add some transparency to that. Okay, so I'm just going to change up my workspace here because I'm starting to have a lot of layers. And I'm just going to select this star tool, holding shift, create a star. Place it in the center of the shape. And I'm just going to center up the anchor point and scale this down a little bit just so I could center it up better. What irritates the crap out of me with stars is that it's not in the center of mass. It's in like the center of the shape, which isn't in the center. So you have to kind of like center it up on your own. It irritates the crap out of me. There's nothing you can do about it, but I'm just going to rename this layer to Sun Beam 1. And I'm going to open this up to the contents, polystar path, grow the outer radius, but the important thing is making the inner radius like that. Bring that under the button, change the color. Just going to use the pick whip or the pick tool to pick that yellow. Then maybe bring the darkness down just a little bit. Now if I duplicate this layer, hit R on the keyboard and rotate this 35 degrees, it's almost just about centered, but it needs to be moved over just a little bit because again, this is not really centered. And now I'm just going to select this, make it just a little bit slightly more orange. That might be too much. This initial one, let me come back here and just make this one I just want there to be some differentiation between the two colors. That's a little bit better. Okay. So I could scale these, rotate these, set keyframes, obviously. The scale like that. K on the keyboard. Set this one to 35, this one to 0. And then scale these up accordingly. And add the smoothing. I'm going to add my cloud. Which I can scale down. Set a position keyframe, transparency keyframe, which would be 0. U on the keyboard. See all your keyframes, K. So I'm going to want the position to be kind of over there. And make this kind of slide in. I'm going to add a drop shadow to this. I kind of feel like the drop shadow on this button is pretty crazy. Bring the opacity down on that. So let's see all of the keyframes now. So these can probably be a little bit faster. Then I'm going to have this cloud kind of be a little bit delayed. The sunbeams I'm also going to maybe take a little bit longer. So that looks good. Now we just need the weather to pop up. Just going to scale up this text. For some reason that got all messed up. It's going to be bold. This is actually go up like that. Won't make that bold, that'll be light. Just gonna hit Control C, Control V. Set the anchor point to the top left, hit S on the keyboard and just scale this down. And I'm gonna maybe make this maybe I'll just center it. S on the keyboard. I'm just going to scale all these down just a little bit. So P on the keyboard, T on the keyboard, set position and transparency keyframes. I'm gonna move them down. I'm just gonna have these go from the bottom to the top, add the same smoothing effect. And I'm gonna make the low temperature just be delayed just a little bit. So let's see what that looks like in full. So I think everything happening after this point's a little slow, so I'm just gonna hold Alt, drag them in. That looks much better. I think that this color change needs to happen as soon as it clicks. The mouse can start moving. So now we're just timing everything up. Okay. Now I think that all of these keyframes, all of this could happen much earlier. Now obviously, this cloud needs to be adjusted because it's not long enough. So I think that that looks good. Obviously, we've kind of been all over the place here in this video. A lot of issues kind of popped up, and when you're doing this kind of stuff, that's going to happen. You're going to run into issues, and something's always going to change. Even if you do something 10 times, it's always going to change. So anyways, guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please be sure to give this video a like. I hope you learned something new. It was a little bit different than normal, but it's kind of all over the place, but that's how it goes. Sometimes things take a little bit longer the second time than they do the first time. So anyways, guys, thanks for watching.